Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're on a pretty critical mission, and that is to really define the science of sleep.
We're going to unpack why sleep is, according to all the research we've dug into, the single most effective thing we can do.
The most effective thing to reset our brain and body health each day.
Exactly. One researcher even called it Mother Nature's best effort yet at contra death.
Contra death, I like that.
And we're moving way beyond this idea of sleep as some kind of luxury.
Right.
The sources, they really established sleep as the preeminent force in that modern health trinity. Diet, exercise, and sleep.
But sitting above diet and exercise.
Sitting right above them. I know that sounds controversial, but the objective science is clear. The impairments, both physical and mental, from just one night of bad sleep, they just dwarf what happens if you skip a meal or a workout.
So sleep deprivation hits harder and it hits faster.
Much harder, much faster.
That is a staggering assertion. And if it's that non-negotiable, I suspect a lot of us are probably missing the mark.
I think so.
So before we get into the deep science, let's give you a quick practical reality check. We found two really powerful rule of thumb questions from the research.
They're great for gauging chronic sleep deprivation. The first one is simple.
Okay.
After you wake up in the morning, let's say around 7 a.m., could you comfortably fall back asleep at 10 or 11 a.m.? If the answer is yes, you are almost certainly carrying a chronic sleep debt. Your body shouldn't be able to just, revert back to sleep that easily.
And the second question, it focuses more on how we get through the day.
It does, it asks. Can you function optimally? Can you feel focused and alert without needing caffeine before noon?
And if the answer to that is a hard no,
Then you are very likely using caffeine to self-medicate. You're treating a state of chronic sleep deprivation that just isn't biologically sustainable.
so if you answered yes to the first or no to the second, then this deep dive is going to explain exactly what that deficit is costing you.
It really is.
Okay, let's start with this evolutionary paradox. I mean, sleep requires us to be completely unconscious, vulnerable, unproductive. So why?
It is the ultimate biological puzzle. Sleep scientist Dr. Alan Rechtschaffen captured this perfectly. He said, if sleep does not serve an absolutely vital function, then it is the biggest mistake the evolutionary process has ever made.
And all the research shows it is absolutely not a mistake.
Far from it. I mean, sleep has persisted heroically across every single species that's been studied, from insects to us. That proves the benefits must just dramatically outweigh the hazards.
So to understand when we sleep, we need to look at the two systems that govern the timing.
Right, there are two. System one is the master conductor, the circadian rhythm.
The internal clock.
Exactly. Think of it as your own internal 24-hour cycle. It runs like a metronome, totally separate from what the outside world is doing.
And we know how autonomous this is because of that classic study in Mammoth Cave, right?
The Clayton and Richardson study, yes.
Yeah.
They spent 32 days in total darkness, deep inside the cave. No sun, no clocks, no cues.
And what happened?
They still maintained this highly predictable pattern. About 15 hours awake, and then about 9 hours asleep. The rhythm is just hardwired.
And it does more than just make you feel tired.
Oh, much more. It governs a critical drop in your core body temperature as you approach bedtime. It reaches its lowest point, the nadir, about 2 hours after you fall asleep.
Wait, so what if I'm forced to pull an all-nighter? Does my temperature still drop?
Yes, it does. And that is the crucial detail. That temperature drop happens even if you are forced to stay awake. It shows how autonomous that system really is.
It's like a program that just has to run.
It cannot be stopped.
So that's the timing system. What about that immediate crushing sensation that, I need to sleep right now?
That's system two, adenosine. This is all about chemical pressure.
Sleep pressure.
Exactly. It's a chemical that builds up in your brain the longer you're awake. Sleep is the only thing that exists to drain that pressure, to wash the adenosine away.
Okay, and this is where I think people get confused. You have this 24-hour clock running and this chemical debt building up. You'd assume they communicate, right?
That is the common assumption, but they absolutely do not. They are two entirely distinct and separate systems.
Wow.
And that's key to understanding something like jet lag. Your circadian rhythm is screaming it's noon in New York, but your adenosine pressure is demanding sleep because you've been awake for 18 hours flying from Tokyo.
That separation explains so much, like that weird second wind you sometimes get late at night, even if you're exhausted.
Precisely. Your circadian system is temporarily overriding that sleep pressure signal.
And speaking of timing, we have to talk about chronotypes. Being a night owl or a morning lark.
Yes. The sources were very clear on this. Whether you are an owl or a lark, is strongly determined by your genetics.
So society really does treat night owls unfairly, branding them as lazy.
It does. Their delayed schedule is biologically unavoidable. Our whole world is sort of a 9 to 5 morning bias society, and that puts maybe 30% of the population at a real disadvantage.
They're fighting their own biology, not laziness.
Absolutely.
So this is where it gets really fascinating. What is actually happening when those two systems finally let us fall asleep? Let's start with non-REM or NREM sleep.
Specifically, deep, slow-wave sleep. This is where the magic of memory consolidation happens. Your brain waves, they dramatically decelerate.
How much slower?
They can become like 10 times slower than when you're awake, these big synchronized waves. And that enables what we call the file transfer process.
Okay, walk me through that. What are the files and where are they going?
So the files are all the memory packets, everything you learned that day. They're temporarily stored in the hippocampus.
The brain's little short-term inbox.
A perfect way to put it. It's fragile storage. So the deep NREM slow waves act like these synchronized couriers, moving those packets from the temporary inbox to the cortex.
The permanent hard drive.
Exactly. And by clearing out the hippocampus overnight, you basically wake up with a refreshed ability to learn new things. If you don't get that deep sleep, the inbox is still full.
And your ability to learn the next day is just shot.
Severely limited. And NREM sleep even has its own defense system.
Against being woken up.
Yes. Through these little bursts of activity called sleep spindles, they literally act as nocturnal soldiers, shielding the brain from external noises that would otherwise wake you up and, abort that critical file transfer.
Incredible. Okay, now let's shift gears to REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. We know the brain is super active, but our bodies are completely paralyzed.
Right. That paralysis is called muscle atonia, and it's a vital safety feature. The brain paralyzes your voluntary muscles so you can dream safely without physically acting out all your impulses.
So if NREM is for memory consolidation, what's the purpose of all that wild activity in REM sleep in the dreaming state?
REM sleep serves two critical interconnected purposes, creativity and emotional processing.
Creativity, that almost sounds a little soft, but this is hard science.
It is. During REM, the brain doesn't just review recent memories. It actively collides them with your entire back catalog of life experience.
Forging new connections.
New and often very bizarre connections. This fusion of old and new information is the literal source of creative insights and novel solutions.
And we have famous historical examples of this, right?
Oh, absolutely. The classic one is Mendeleev dreaming up the periodic table, or Otto Lowy conceiving the experiment that proved chemical neurotransmission, which won him a Nobel Prize. All from a dream.
And the second function, emotional processing.
Correct. Dream sleep is like overnight therapy. It helps strip away the intense emotional charge from a memory, like a traumatic event.
What?
It lets you remember the facts without re-experiencing the original raw emotion.
Okay, before we get to the consequences of not sleeping, we have to tackle two big demographic myths. First, age. People think older adults need less sleep.
It's a dangerous myth. They need just as much sleep as they did in middle age, but they're simply far less able to generate it.
So their sleep quality declines.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
Sleep efficiency. That's the time you spend asleep versus time in bed. It can drop from 95% in a healthy teen to maybe 70 or 80% in your 80s. And that drop is directly linked to a higher mortality risk.
And the second group, teenagers. That constant battle over early school start times.
It's entirely biological. Adolescence brings this profound, mandatory shift in their circadian rhythm. It delays their peak wakefulness until 9 p.m. or even later.
So they can't just go to bed earlier.
They physically cannot. And this biological shift conflicts so sharply with early school start times. We're forcing them to learn during their absolute circadian low point. It's like asking them to pull an all-nighter every single weekday.
If that's not enough to make you prioritize your 8 hours, let's talk about the deadly consequences. Acute cognitive impairment is terrifying, especially for public safety.
It is deeply troubling. The stats show that one person dies every single hour in the U.S. from a fatigue-related error in traffic.
1 in an hour.
And here's the really disquieting part. Vehicular accidents caused by drowsy driving exceed those caused by alcohol and drugs combined.
That is just shocking. It completely reframes how we should think about driving while tired.
It absolutely should. The science shows if you've been awake for just 19 hours, say you got up at 7 a.m. and you're driving home at 2 a.m., you are as cognitively impaired as someone who is legally drunk.
A 0.08 blood alcohol level.
Exactly. Your reaction time, your focus, It's just as degraded.
And the chronic impairment from just partial sleep loss might be even worse because we adapt to it. We stop realizing how impaired we are.
We stop noticing, but the brain does not stop declining. Look at the famous Dinges study. They limited people to just 4 hours of sleep for 6 nights in a row.
What happened?
By the end of those 6 nights, their performance was as bad as someone who had pulled a full 24-hour all-nighter.
Wow. And they saw a 400% increase in those microsleeps, right?
A 400% increase, where the brain just shuts down for a few seconds without you even knowing it. By day 11, their performance matched someone who'd been awake for 48 hours straight.
And you can't just sleep it off on the weekend.
You can't. The brain never fully gets back all the sleep it's lost. You can't truly repay that sleep debt.
And if we connect this to our overall body health,
The message is stark. The shorter your sleep, the shorter your life. Lack of sleep is causally linked to every single major cause of death. Heart disease, diabetes, obesity, cancer, all of them.
can we break down that metabolic fallout? Why does sleep loss lead to weight gain?
It's a profound hormonal imbalance. Lack of sleep causes a surge in ghrelin, the hormone that makes you feel ravenously hungry.
Okay.
And at the same time, it suppresses leptin, which is the hormone that signals you're full. So you feel hungrier and you never feel satisfied.
That is a biological recipe for overeating.
And it gets worse. If you try to diet while you're sleep deprived, research shows most of the weight you lose will be lean body mass muscle, not fat.
Yeah.
Your body desperately holds on to fat.
And it's not just metabolism. We saw evidence in reproductive health, too.
Yes, that study was incredible. They took healthy young men, limited them to 5 hours of sleep for just 1 week.
And
It caused a drop in their testosterone levels equivalent to aging them 10 to 15 years in 1 week.
what about emotionally? Why do we feel so angry and out of control when we're tired?
Brain imaging gives us the answer. Sleep deprivation caused a 60% amplification in emotional reactivity in the amygdala.
The brain's anger and rage center.
Right. And without sleep, the prefrontal cortex, your logical, rational brake pedal, basically disconnects from the amygdala. You're left with these primitive, uncontrolled emotional swings.
And to wrap up the consequences, we have the ultimate proof that sleep is necessary for life itself.
That proof comes from 2 places. First, the tragic human disease, fatal familial insomnia. Patients just stop sleeping, and they die within 12 to 18 months.
And the animal studies.
The animal studies are definitive. Rats died after just 15 days of total sleep deprivation. Sleep is not optional. It is a prerequisite for survival.
So the consequences are clear, but diagnosing if someone is a poor sleeper can be tricky because our own perception is so warped.
It is. That's why we need standardized tools, like the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, the PSQI.
And what does that do?
It gives a quantitative and qualitative score for sleep quality over a 1-month period. It moves us beyond just, I feel tired. A score greater than 5 is a really sensitive indicator of poor sleep quality.
And if the quality is poor, many people immediately reach for sleeping pills. But our sources had a major warning about that.
A critical warning. Most prescription sleeping pills are physically addictive, and that dependency just scales with use. But the truly alarming finding is the mortality risk.
What did the study show?
Users were 3.6 to 5.3 times more likely to die over a 2.5-year period than non-users.
That is a terrifying statistic. And that includes even occasional users.
Yes, taking as few as 18 pills a year. Just 18.
Yeah.
Made you 3.6 times more likely to die.
But beyond the mortality risk, there's a functional problem, isn't there?
A huge one. Drug-induced sleep is not natural sleep. It doesn't effectively solidify those memory connections. The critical file transfer just isn't happening properly.
So if pills are dangerous and ineffective, what is the preferred treatment?
The gold standard is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI. It's the first-line treatment because it produces sustained, long-term results. It actually addresses the root cause.
Not just masking the symptoms.
Exactly. And it's highly effective. But for non-pharmacological activities, one really stood out.
Which one was that?
Resistance training.
Yeah.
Lifting weights. It was found to be the single most effective sleep hygiene strategy for improving sleep quality in non-elderly people.
Okay, let's run through some practical tips to optimize natural sleep. Starting with the biggest enemy, caffeine.
You have to time it rigorously. A single dose of caffeine can mess with your sleep even 10 hours later. A coffee at 2 p.m. means a quarter of that dose is still circulating in your brain at midnight.
And what about alcohol? So many people use it as a sleep aid.
It is the enemy of REM sleep. That study on learning was crystal clear. Drinking alcohol on the third night after learning something new caused a nearly 40% loss of that knowledge.
Because it just destroys REM consolidation.
It absolutely savages it.
Yeah.
Alcohol doesn't help you sleep, it sedates you and it fragments your sleep quality.
And finally, environment, light and temperature.
Light is the primary signal for our circadian rhythm. Reading on an iPad suppressed melatonin by over 50% compared to a printed book. You're actively fighting your body's readiness for sleep.
And we need to be cool to sleep.
You do. Your core body temperature has to drop. You literally need to get the nighttime chills to initiate the process properly.
And one final jarring thought, the alarm clock.
Alarm clocks are just inherently stressful. They cause this immediate, unnatural spike in blood pressure and heart rate. It's a burst of the fight or flight system.
We are the only species that does this.
The only species on the planet that artificially terminates sleep.
So the unequivocal message from this entire deep dive is just loud and clear. There are no biological functions that do not benefit from a good night's sleep.
And that has to translate into systemic, societal change, starting with education. It's just sobering that basically 0% of people surveyed receive any education on sleep health.
But the good news is, when systems do prioritize sleep, the results are massive.
They are so powerful. Look at Dina, Minnesota. They delayed school start times, and it resulted in a 70% drop in traffic accidents involving teens.
It's a 70%.
Or in hospitals, using dim lighting in NICUs, preterm babies were discharged 5 weeks earlier. Prioritizing sleep is a huge public health win.
So as you think about everything we've discussed, consider this. If sleep is the primary mechanism for turning new experiences into wisdom, for fueling creativity,
If that NREM file transfer and that REM-driven creative collision happens every single night, you are fully rested.
what might you be capable of achieving or solving if you consistently optimize that process? How much untapped potential is lying right there in your own nightly